All right, we're gonna work on the x-axis today. I also worked on the little top hat, the part that goes on top of the printer. It's the very last step you're supposed to do, but I went ahead and did it anyway. So let's look and see where we're at. I built the x-axis already. There was no real new part. Well, the only new thing was one of these screws. This one here and here is a self-tapping screw, meaning that it's got a really coarse thread on it, and so you have to just screw it into the plastic here. So there's no nut, there's no heat set, threaded insert, there's none of that. That's the only new part to it. This one does have several captured nuts that you have to get lined up. I did find a different way to line them up this time. Again, with the magnets, if you put one in there, you can kind of move it to wherever you need it. So I did use that on getting these bottom pieces lined up where the nut could line up with the screw that was going to go through it. There's one you leave off for a little mount for this guy. We'll put it on in a minute. Right now, what I'm going to do is I am going to mount this guy here, and it says to leave everything a little bit loose so that you can get everything lined up, and then we will tram it, basically push it all the way to the back, and we will look at how the how to get it aligned with the other axes. I'll show you the top hat. This little guy. I printed this on the Prusa Mini, so each one of these corners is its own piece. There is an option to print the entire thing at once, which would be probably a little bit better. There was nothing really bad about building this part. There are lots of little pieces inside here that hold everything together, and they're different types, and so you do have to figure out which one goes where. And it works fine. The only issue I had was getting all four of these corners to actually sit on the body of the printer, the chassis. They have these pegs in them right here on each corner that go into receptacles on the printer, and getting all that lined up was a little bit of an issue. What I ended up doing is loosening the internal ones in the corners just enough to where there was a little bit of movement, putting it on the printer, and then tightening everything down, these corners, tightening them down once it's on the printer. And that seems to have fixed this little guy. I don't know if I'll use this one too much or not, but basically what it does is it encloses the top of the printer so that if you do want to run almost a heated chamber type of setup, you can do that. But that's actually the last step you're supposed to do. I just got I don't know, kind of interested in the build. I still like everything. I will say that the instructions for this particular piece, they were fine, but the parts here and here are very similar. They're mirror images more or less, but they're similar enough that it is a little bit tricky to follow the instructions and figure out what piece is going where, but it's not that big a deal. In the end, the left side needs the roller on top and the right side needs the roller on the bottom. There is one diagram in there that shows you preloading some nuts, and it's a little bit unclear where you're preloading them, but it ends up that what you're preloading is the nuts on the bottom and the two here and two here. There's still one I haven't used in this spot until I put that guy on. So I'm going to mount this and then we'll come back. Before I go too far, I will show that these use, they call them flathead. These are countersink head, so they have this little triangular cone on the bottom of them. But in the instructions, they call them flathead cap screws, and so that they are flush inside here when you're done mounting them. All right, now we're gonna get this guy straight. So we're just gonna push it all the way back so see how it can still move around. We want it actually straight there. And then we'll tighten these down, and I'll finish tightening this. I did put the little in-stop trigger holder in here, and so I do need to put a screw that goes in there once I get it all tightened down. So I'm going to tighten these down and put that screw in, and the next part, I believe, will be we need to run the belts through here. Okay, there was one other step. I had to put these rails here on the top. They just screw into the ends on either end. You do preload a couple in here, two in on the inside for the top hat if you want to screw it down versus just use these little holes to hold it in place, and then three on the outside for the panels. Then we did some heat set threaded inserts for mounting our little carriage here, and we'll work on that next. Okay, I have temporarily just mounted this here just to get measurements, and I have cut two of the same length belts. I just used some side cutters to cut them, and it seems the easiest way or the best way to get these started is to start at the pulley and get that part, because there's teeth on the pulley, so you kind of have to get the belt started around that edge. And so I just kind of used a small little Allen wrench to guide the belt through there. It's almost come out, but not quite yet. All right. All right, got that around there. Took a little bit of persuading with a little small Allen, and then it's gonna go, this is the lower belt path, and it's just gonna go around, come in here, and then it's gonna, I'll have to unmount this to actually attach it there, and then over here it's gonna just come around the front. See if we can, I should have slightly more than I need, I hope. The belt that they supplied in the kit, it doesn't let you like make a mistake, a large mistake, but there is plenty of belt in the kit. Go around there. Convincing the belt to do what you want it sometimes is a little tricky. All right, and yeah, I'm going to have plenty to get it mounted in there, and then we'll cut off the extra with our little side cutters. All right, I'm going to route the other belt. It goes on the same exact path but a mirror image, and it's the top route, and going to be driven by the, I don't know if that's the A or the B motor, but the motor on the left hand side. And so I'll come back and we'll have it mounted here, and that should be our belts. Then we need to tension them, and you tension them with these two screws. Oh, that is important. I do have these pushed in as far as they will go so that I have the maximum amount of tension available to pull the steppers inward when I tighten these screws, so that I can apply tension. Equal tension on these belts is super important. Otherwise you'll get like rhombus type shapes when you want squares and things like that, ovals when you want circles. You'll get motion that you don't intend. So equal tension on this belt and the one that I'm about to apply is very important. And that's kind of why I didn't just cut the belts in half. You can see I have this much left over from the kit. I ran one of them. Basically, I ran this one, used its length to cut the other one. So they're exact same length. So I should have at least a good chance of getting them mostly tensioned the same. Okay, we've got the belts ran. I have checked that everything's lined up on the right pulleys. Nothing's like crossed or anything. I've tightened this side here, and have a very short lead there. And this is the leftover, so I'm just kind of pulling them through an equal amount. So the belt started out the equal length, and now I've pulled them through pretty much an equal amount, pretty much exactly. So I'm going to tighten that down. It's relatively tight right now, and we'll finish tensioning with the tensioning knobs. So I'm going to tighten this screw. This is holding these little plates back here that hold the belts in place. And then we'll shear off this excess over here. I'm going to screw it down, and then we will tension with these, and hopefully everything will be exactly the way we want it. So I will come back with that part done. Okay, I've got that. I've done a little bit of tensioning. I'm not exactly sure how tight these need to be, so they're kind of in the middle of how tight they can be. Just like on the, I think the very first step, this kit doesn't appear to come with M2x6 button head screws, which is what are called for. So I use socket head. The only one I'm worried about is if this one has a clearance issue. These are down recessed below the surface, so they should be fine. This one I just don't know. We shall see. I want to cut these off so they're not hanging out here. Honestly, this belt issue is the scariest part to me, because I don't. I'd have to order a replacement belt. I don't have any way to replace it were it to have some issue on the way I built it. So we shall see. I don't know, and I don't know how tight these have to be up against here to avoid interference with other things. I'm just going to do this. There's these screws here that there must be some kind of clearance available in this location anyway. But now we have motion, and it, you know, there's no slop in it anywhere. So I'm thinking we're good. The next step will be, we're actually going to build the bed itself, mount it to the carrier. I think we're good on this one. The number of parts left are really small. There's some heat set inserts, lots of number 3 screws, and a few nuts. Mostly, I think there's wiring and getting this bed done before we're ready to go. So I think we're getting there. It's actually been a really good build. Not having done one of these Core XY before, I'm a little nervous about how the XY system works, but we followed all the instructions. Everything seems pretty clear, and it seems like we got the belts to equal tension. We'll know more once we actually start printing something. All right, that'll probably end this video, and then I'll create a new video for the bed. All right, so we're working on the bed itself. This one I've put it together, and there is one, I guess it's a complaint on the kit. So I was able to work around it, but I did have to have some tools that, I don't know, you may not have these particular things on hand. So it's fine, and you could do this, you could continue without even doing this step, but there's this thermal fuse right here. There we go, that little white block. And the instructions have you install that right here. And there's a screw hole to install it in. This piece of aluminum, the bed itself, did not have that piece of aluminum in it. So, or no, it didn't have the hole in the piece of aluminum, rather. I said that wrong. I still need to wire it up. So it's going to basically, what it's going to do is the wires, these 2 wires from the thermal fuse are basically going to patch into one of the heater wires so that it is in series with the bed heater itself, and then it will, kind of can't see that, can you? Let's actually, let's just start all over. All right, we're working on the bed. I've mostly assembled it, haven't put the springs on it. This one, I do have a little complaint with the kit. So the aluminum plate here that the bed is made of, it's a nice piece of aluminum. You know, it's I guess that's probably 5mm thick, really heavy, flat piece of aluminum. And then we put the energetic 3D bed on there. There's a magnetic sheet. You just stick that on there. Slight complaint, not horrible, but the magnetic sheet does not come with holes in it, so I punched holes for accessing the screws. You shouldn't ever really have to access them, but if you did, then you'd have to know where those were. So I just went ahead and punched holes in them. This one kind of tore out a little bit, but that's for a different reason. The bigger complaint I have with the kit. So that's a minor complaint, that it doesn't have holes in it. You could put the screws in there, screw them down, and then put the sticker on, and it would be fine. Assuming you'd put these screws in before putting the magnetic sheet on, then it would be fine, and you'd probably never have a problem with it. The actual complaint has to do with the thermal fuse. So the thermal fuse did come with the kit, and what it's going to do is it's going to patch into one of the heater wires, so the bed heater wires, and basically be in series with the bed heater, and if anything gets out of control, it will shut things down. It says that it trips at 125 degrees Celsius, so it will limit your bed temperature to 125 degrees Celsius, but I don't know when I'm going to run it that hot anyway. But it does give you a little bit of protection in case something malfunctions and it tries to get that hot. The complaint, that's all good. The complaint is that you're supposed to mount this fuse to the aluminum, and the instructions online have you do that, and it shows a hole where you can actually mount the fuse. The problem is the kit does not have a hole in that spot, or a hole anywhere for mounting the fuse. So I suppose you could mount it with maybe some sort of heat conductive film, tape of some sort. But I wanted to go ahead and mount it with a screw. And so that meant I had to drill and tap a tiny little screw hole. I did go ahead and use M3 since everything else was M3. I didn't have one that's short enough. There may be one that's, when I'm done with all the kit, there might be a leftover one that's short enough. I didn't have another one that's short enough, so I did have to create a stack of washers to take up some slack. But to do that, you have to have tap and drill the right size. I actually did have a M3 tap, and so you have to find the 2.5 millimeter drill bit to drill the right size hole to actually tap it. I didn't have a bottoming tap, so this one does have a point on it, so I don't have a whole lot of threads in there. It should be enough because there's no real force on this. It's just sitting there. It doesn't other than thermal stresses, it doesn't have any force applied to it, so it should be okay. In general, you only need 3 threads to pretty much carry the entire load of a threaded joint. So we should be fine. It's not as many threads as I would like, but it is threaded now, and there is a hole there to mount it. So if you don't have a way to do that, then you're going to be stuck with either omitting the thermal fuse entirely, which is fine. It will still, the printer will still work fine. It's more just a safety precaution, so it is completely fine to leave it out as far as the function of the printer. But since I had it, I did think that it might as well be in there. The instructions in the manual do say it's optional, but since it's there, it does make me wonder, well, maybe this has been a problem in the past, so I want to go ahead and put the thermal fuse on there just in case. This printer will end up being mostly enclosed, so it's possible that something gets in a thermal runaway type of situation. I don't really know. So that's kind of my first actual complaint with the kit, and even then, it's one that you could totally get around with just not installing the thermal fuse. But I did want to put it in there, so that meant I had to go find a small tap and the right hardware and the drill for it and all that, which I was able to do. It's just annoying to not have that in there already. So what I'm going to do now is put the bed springs on. It has the die style, the flat wire springs. I do like these a little bit more. The flat wire, when you compress them, they more or less aren't going to buckle. So they're going to compress directly straight down, where the round wire springs tend have a opportunity at least to buckle. Now they have a guide rod, the screw that's going to go through the middle of them, so they can't buckle very far. But I don't know. These just give you a little bit higher spring constant, and in general, that is better, particularly if I'm going to do high speed. But in this case, the bed only moves very slowly up and down. So it will move for retraction, so that's as fast as it'll move. Any kind of retraction is going to be done by the bed moving down and then back up, versus like on the more popular style of printers, the Ender 3s or whatever, where the head itself, the print head, moves up. So it will have some quick movements, and so I do want a pretty stiff spring there, since retractions will cause the bed to move kind of fast. All right, so I'm going to mount that thing in there. I've got this. I still need to tap into the wire here. I have to solder these into this wire so that it actually does something. Right now it's just mounted there. It doesn't do anything. So I'll have to do that also. And we'll have the bed mounted. And then we're down to the wire on, actually pretty much the wire. We have to get the wiring done. We have to assemble the print head itself also. All right, I think that's probably it for this video, and we'll come back. I think the print head will be next, and then we'll start wiring, and soon we'll start printing, hopefully, unless we run into some major issue. Oh, I will say, when I was mounting this, I did use a little glue roller to kind of, make sure everything was nice and solidly attached with no air bubbles in there. All right, we'll see you on the next one.